report. So these are really the very handy and practical keywords to speak about today. In outlining the subject, let me say that we can approach it from three different angles. Manifestations, limitations, and expectations, as applied to both terms, democracy and theocracy. So let me say a word first about manifestations of democracy in Egypt. As it is being presented, it's one of the few democracies in the Middle East. It has a multi-party system. It officially acknowledges pluralism. There are elections, competitions, freedom of expression, parliament in action, and different manifestations of a democracy. But in reality, the word manifestations has its different connotations. In fact, it can be something substantive and genuine, and it can be only something ostentatious and only for appearance at a cosmetic level. And I think both apply to Egypt. If you compare Egypt with other countries in the area, it would be not just a democracy, but a panacea for freedom and haven for liberty, because the comparison is with such bad cases in the area, be it I don't know, Iraq, Saddam Hussein, or Syria, whatever, these very repressive regimes where people cannot even open their mouths. In Egypt, the case is different, of course. We can speak up, we can criticize the government, we can make our views heard and known. We don't necessarily go to prison for this simple reason. So we enjoy a measure of freedom of expression, at least, especially for opposition political forces, the legitimate ones who have a legal status, certain political parties. We have about a dozen political parties in Egypt, but there are about 4 major ones. The others are tiny formations. So we have a pluralistic constitution also, which acknowledges the existence of different political parties and so on. But in essence, Egypt is not a great democracy. It's a great democracy only when you compare it with our bad brothers and neighbors. Only then it would be a good and advanced case. But if you compare it or relate it to some of the basic tenets of what democracy should be, of course Egypt is not a democracy. We would be deluding ourselves if we allege otherwise. It is not a democracy and it is not a dictatorship. It is non-democracy, non-dictatorship. It's something in between, hovering in between. And both manifestations exist. Manifestations of democracy and manifestations of non-democracy as well. We have, for example, political torture in prisons, maybe at a lesser scale than some of our neighbors, but we do have it, and we complain against it every day in human rights organizations. Speaking of human rights organizations, sometimes the government acknowledges our existence and say, okay, we respect the human rights and we are in good rapprochement with you. Other times they say, no, you are agents of foreign powers and you are traitors of the national interest, something like that. So the discourse is really conflicting and it changes from time to time. Nowadays it's bad time for human rights organizations in Egypt. Partly because of certain American implications, I'll speak about this later, but also partly because the broad democratic experiment in Egypt is going backward rather than forward. And this makes me emphasize the non-democracy aspects. As I say, we have political torture, we have political party pluralism, but we have only one ruling party, eternally ruling. No one else has any chance of becoming the ruling party, of this opposition party. So opposition is forever, or the ruling party is ruling forever. And this is not really a democracy. I mean, the democratic part of it is the fact that the ruling party acknowledges that there are other opposition political parties and it does not have to repress them all the time, but allows them certain freedom of expression, but not to the point of surrendering power to them. Which takes us to the issue of elections.